Hi, fans of high-quality entertainment. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 15 either, bands or solo artists that I feel are either as good live or even sometimes better live. And these are just, my own personal opinion, of course, as always. And I'm sure, there's going to be lots of other bands that, you think are great in concert. Let me know in the comments section below some of the picks that you would have. So these aren't ranked or anything, but I believe there's 15 of them. So here we go. First up, it's the sensational Alex Harvey Band, and there's a good reason why sensational is in the the title of the band, because they were sensational on on their studio albums and also live. I would say, yeah, they were just as good or just as great live as in the studio. Their studio albums are excellent, and Zell Clemenson, the clown on the right side, he was the lead guitarist in the band, and I feel he's one of the most underrated guitarists in rock music. And then, of course, the great Alex Harvey in the center there, the great vocalist. So they're my first choice. Another great live artist is... it's The Who. I had to pick The Who or I'd I'd have some complaints. But definitely The Who were... would you say they were better live? Like, I'm mainly thinking about in the Keith Moon era, of course. They were a powerhouse live. And they were just more... I think they were kind of equal. Their studio albums were excellent, and they were excellent live too, but a little rougher, of course, around the edges, especially with Keith Moon on drums. Yes. Yeah, I've seen Yes in concert on their Tornado tour, and the first thing I noticed, not that I was going to a lot of concerts back in the day, but John Anderson sounded just like he does on the albums, and even today. From, the recent live album with the Band Geeks, and he always sounds amazing live. And the whole band, of course, in their prime. I'm talking with a lot of these artists, I'm talking about in their prime, right? And so Yes was, I think sometimes they were better live than in the studio. Next up, it's Sparks. I had to include Sparks. Yeah, I would say they're as good live as, on their albums. And Russell Mael, I think he's 70, is he 77 now or something like that? He's still got his whole vocal range. He can still hit the high notes. And of course, Ron Mael on keyboards is always great. They have an excellent backing band. And yeah, so I would say they sound as good live as in the studio. And I've seen them on their last 3 tours with Molly in Toronto. And of course, I met them backstage. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that before. Next up. Yeah, David Bowie. Well, through all of the eras, not just with Mick Ronson, who was amazing, but he always picked stellar musicians in his band. So David Bowie was always, I feel, great live. Next. Yeah, another band, if I didn't include, I'd be getting some negative comments. But you have to include Queen. I love Queen, but they're never going to be, in my top 10 bands of all time. But definitely a great live band. And I don't know, I think maybe they were even better live than in the studio. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Brew. Next up, Blue Oyster Cult. Yeah, they are always, I think even today, they're great live. And this was probably in the mid-70s. And of course, Buck Dharma, one of the most underrated guitarists in rock music. Eric Bloom on the far left. Alan Lanier. And then on the far right is Joe Bouchard, one of the two Bouchard brothers. I think sometimes, once again, they were better live than in the studio. Devo. Yeah, I love Devo, and I think they're one band that, once again, they're a bit, I love their early studio albums, but I think they're even better live, at least back, in the late 70s, early 80s. It's Ween. Yeah. Of course, it's Gene Ween, who's on the left, and Dean Ween on the right. That's just their stage names. And they've got this great band behind them. It's, too bad they're not doing anything these last few years. Hopefully they do some more touring, and maybe a new album would be nice. But they are different live than in the studio, but they are as great. I think maybe even, once again, sometimes even better live, because they jam a bit more, on stage, and Dean does probably a lot more long guitar solos, and he's a superb guitarist. So they're another one of my choices. It's Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. Yeah, very similar to David Bowie. Frank always had, excellent musicians in his band. So I think the strongest one was probably around 1973, 1974. Ruth Underwood and all the other great musicians. But yeah. So once again, yeah, sometimes his studio albums would include live tracks, or even some tracks would have partially live and partially studio. So he was great live and in the studio. I have to admit it, even though I'm not a fan anymore. I've seen U2 in concert twice, for their Joshua Tree tour, and then in 2010. And they are excellent live. And yeah, so I feel they're as good live as in the studio. Way to go, U2. Grand Funk Railroad. Once again, in the early 70s, I think they were better live than, their early studio albums are great. But, Grand Funk Live album, that's my favorite live album of all time. And yeah, I think they're better live than even in the studio. It's the Beatles. Now, throughout their career, when they started out, they'd have these little tiny amplifiers on stage, and, all the girls screaming and all that. And so, sometimes it was probably difficult to even hear what they were playing. But, when they did their final performance on the roof in January of 1969, they were excellent. I won't say they were better than, in the studio, but they were great live. And I've watched this performance many, many times. The Beatles were a great live band. Couple more here. It's Sir Paul McCartney and his band, of course, who have been with him for many, many, many years, longer than longer than the Beatles and Wings together, which is amazing. So we got Abe Laboriel Jr. on drums, Rusty Anderson on the left, Brian Ray on the right, who I've interviewed, and then there's Paul Wixon on keyboards. He's just not in the picture. And in case you don't know, I did meet the band backstage with my ex. And there's pictures of me with Brian and also Rusty Anderson. They were great. I didn't meet Paul McCartney, but it didn't matter to me because I saw him live 9 rows back, center stage, and he played for 3 hours straight. And yeah, the band was super nice. It's friggin' Led. That's right, I said friggin'. It's friggin' Led Zeppelin. Now, they are different live than in the studio because, they really stretch out some of the songs, maybe sometimes a bit too much. But I love when they play live. I think they're just excellent live. Different than the studio, so I can't say they're better live than in the studio, but I think they're as great live as they are in the studio. But, maybe you disagree. Let me know in the comment section below. And that is it. Just some of the bands that I think are as good live as in the studio, or, like I said, sometimes even better. Let me know your choices in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Please remember to like the video.